All right, welcome to another deep dive. We are diving into some seriously murky waters today, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're headed down to the Bahamas.
Beautiful beaches.
Beautiful beaches, you got that right. But this story, this is anything but a vacation, okay?
Oh, okay. All right. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so we got some incredible sources on this international cocaine trafficking ring.
Wow.
And get this, it goes all the way up to, like, the highest levels of the Bahamian government. We're talking indictments, millions in bribes. There are even accusations that Bahamian officials were straight up helping these traffickers dodge the U.S. Coast Guard.
Now that's a story.
It is. And to help us, break it all down, we have an expert in international crime joining us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to really dig into this. The sheer scale of this alleged operation is what really grabs me right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, 13 individuals, that's how many of the U.S. indictment names. 13 people accused of running this huge cocaine smuggling operation.
That's a lot of people.
It is. And then you add on top of that, right, the claims that high-ranking Bahamian officials, they weren't just, looking the other way. They were actively helping these guys.
Yeah, and that's what really got me too, right? You think about the Bahamas,
Yeah.
you think about this beautiful island nation, tourist paradise, all that. But behind all that, there could be this whole network of corruption just fueling this huge drug operation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. What can you tell us about this indictment? Like, what are they specifically being accused of, these 13 individuals?
Well, it reads like a well-oiled machine they've got going. This thing has allegedly been running for years.
Oh, wow.
We're talking tons of cocaine, tons smuggled through the Bahamas, and these corrupt officials, they allegedly had control over airports, gave inside info, basically doing everything to keep these traffickers ahead of the law. And the indictment itself, it lays it all out, right? It gets into the specifics of how they did it, what each person's role was, and the amount of drugs. It's a lot.
It sounds like a very extensive network.
Yeah.
Not just a few people, right? This sounds like a lot of people involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of impact are we looking at here? What kind of impact do you think this is going to have on the Bahamas? Especially, the political landscape there.
Well, I think the political fallout could be huge. The public is already, they want action. They want to see something done, and fast.
Right.
Scandals like this, they shake people's trust in their government.
They do.
And don't forget, one of the people caught up in this is a high-ranking politician.
Oh, right.
This person allegedly promised to help these traffickers, smooth things over for them, all for a cool $2 million bribe.
$2 million.
$2 million.
Wow, that just shows the scale of this whole thing.
Absolutely.
So what's been the reaction from the Bahamas so far? Have any of these accused individuals said anything?
Well, the Bahamian Prime Minister, Philip Davis, he addressed it in Parliament.
He did. Okay.
Yeah. Strong condemnation, vowed to hold those responsible accountable. He even said, and I quote, "This betrayal will not go unanswered."
Wow.
So, he seems pretty committed to getting to the bottom of it.
That's pretty powerful language.
Yeah.
So has the unnamed official, the one accused of taking that $2 million bribe, have they said anything?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about who that might be. Some people suspect it's the Bahamas National Security Minister, Munroe.
Oh, really?
He's come out denying any involvement, said, and I quote, "I have not offered to accommodate any wrongdoing."
Okay.
Yeah, very firm denial there. And he's also mentioned that Prime Minister Davis is the one handling all the communication with the U.S. about this unnamed official.
So they're not saying who it is.
Not yet, no.
So you've got these accusations flying around, a potential corruption scandal brewing, and it sounds very delicate. What do you think the long-term consequences could be? Not just for the Bahamas, but for their relationship with the United States.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. The U.S. they're not messing around with this. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, he made it clear they are going after corrupt officials, no matter where they are, who are helping drug traffickers.
Yep.
This case could really put a strain on the relationship between the U.S. and the Bahamas, especially if it looks like the Bahamian government isn't fully cooperating with the investigation.
It's like this balancing act between international diplomacy and law enforcement, right?
Exactly.
Because you've got this, this popular tourist destination, a country that relies heavily on its relationship with the U.S., and now they're facing these accusations of harboring high-level corruption that's aiding international drug trafficking. Yeah. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but I think a lot depends on what the Bahamian government does next. If they conduct a thorough investigation, a transparent one, if they hold people accountable, even if it means going after powerful figures,
Yeah.
that could go a long way, not just to restore public trust, but also, on the world stage to maintain their reputation.
So the Bahamas is at a crossroads here. They can try to brush this under the rug and risk even more damage, or they can use this as a chance to show they're serious about transparency, about the rule of law.
Yeah, and it also brings up a bigger question. How can countries, especially ones like the Bahamas, right, that are on these drug trafficking routes, how can they balance their own sovereignty with a need to work with other countries to fight transnational crime?
That's a question that takes us way beyond the Bahamas, right? That's a global issue.
It is.
In this case, it's really just, it's a tip of the iceberg. And it makes you wonder if something like this, with this level of alleged corruption, can happen in a place like the Bahamas. Where else is it happening?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's one that, law enforcement agencies all over the world are trying to answer.
This has been a really fascinating start to our deep dive. We've learned so much about the complexities of international crime, how difficult it is to fight corruption, and the consequences, the far-reaching consequences of the drug trade. But we've only just scratched the surface, Stick with us as we keep going deeper into this compelling case.
The more we look at these allegations, the thing that really gets me is how this case shows just how hard it is to actually stop transnational crime.
Yeah.
It's like trying to hold water in your hands.
This slips right through.
It does. You've got these criminal networks. They don't care about borders. They find the loopholes. They exploit the weaknesses in different country systems. It's like they're always a step ahead.
Yeah, it really does feel that way. Like
Yeah.
they're always one step ahead.
And in this case, this shows how these porous borders, they become these pathways for all kinds of illegal activity. You think about it, the Bahamas, hundreds of islands.
Right.
It's almost impossible to keep an eye on every bit of coastline, every airstrip, every harbor.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It is. It's
Oh.
like law enforcement's got this massive jigsaw puzzle trying to figure out where these traffickers are going, how the drugs are moving.
Yeah.
And that's just the logistics of it. Then you've got corruption on top of that. When you've got officials who are willing to look the other way or even help these criminal organizations, that's a whole other level of complication.
Absolutely. It really makes you wonder, like, how can any country really effectively fight this when you've got, corruption woven into it at all these different levels?
It's like a disease, right? It spreads and it weakens the whole system.
Yeah.
It's pretty sobering, and it brings up a really key point.
Yeah.
You can't fight this kind of crime without international cooperation. One country alone, it can't do it.
So what does that look like? What does that cooperation look like in practice?
Well, it means sharing information,
Yeah.
intelligence. It means coordinating law enforcement efforts, helping each other out legally. In this case, it was U.S. authorities that investigated and got these indictments. But they're going to need the Bahamian government's help to actually arrest these people, to gather evidence.
So it's this dance, this delicate dance between respecting each country's, independence and working together to fight something that threatens everybody.
Exactly. And it's not always easy. There's conflicting interests, there's politics involved, there's trust issues. It can get really complicated.
Yeah. It sounds like walking a diplomatic tightrope.
It is.
But beyond that, beyond the cooperation between governments, what else can be done to really address the root causes of this?
That's where it gets even tougher. We have to remember, drug trafficking, it thrives on supply and demand. There's a huge demand for cocaine in the U.S. and other parts of the world. And as long as people want it, there are going to be people willing to supply it, no matter how risky it is, no matter how wrong it is.
It's this cycle that's almost impossible to break.
Yeah.
And it seems like, a lot of the focus is on stopping the drugs themselves, but what about the demand?
That's the other half of the equation, and it often gets overlooked. We need to deal with the reasons people get addicted to drugs in the first place. We need to invest in prevention, in treatment. We need to change how we think about drug use, challenge the ideas that make it seem glamorous.
Right. So it's a multifaceted problem, and it needs a multifaceted solution.
Yeah.
But shifting gears a bit here, I'm curious about your thoughts on the impact of this on the Bahamian police force. Specifically, Munroe's comments about, holding everyone accountable, even those at the top.
That statement, that's really interesting. By saying that it would be reprehensible, that's his word, if the police force were covering up wrongdoing, he's basically acknowledging that there could be this deeper culture of corruption within the Royal Bahamas police force.
So it's not just a few bad apples?
It might not be. It suggests that this case, it might just be scratching the surface.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
If what's in that indictment is true, and this has been going on for years, I mean, how many people in the police force might have known about it, might have been involved?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it raises some serious questions about the integrity of the entire institution, and it highlights how important it is to have real reforms to deal with this systemic corruption and rebuild trust with the public.
This deep dive, it's really eye-opening. We started with this image of this beautiful island paradise, and now we're uncovering this potential web of corruption and how it's tied to the global drug trade. It's a lot to process, all these different layers.
It is, and it's important to remember that behind the headlines, behind all the legal stuff, there are real people who are affected by this. The families of the people who are arrested, the communities that are dealing with drug trafficking, and the people who are working so hard to try to stop it.
It's easy to forget that, right? The human element.
It is. This isn't just some abstract geopolitical thing. It has real consequences for people, for communities.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to talk about it, to shine a light on how complicated transnational crime is, and to look for ways to fix it,
Sure.
to find solutions that are fair, that make people safer, and that treat everyone with dignity.
That's what it's all about.
This case has brought up so many questions, and I bet our listeners is really wanting to hear your final thoughts on all of this. So let's take a moment to think about everything we've learned and what could happen next in this unfolding story. We've really been digging deep into this case of alleged corruption and cocaine trafficking in the Bahamas. And it seems like this story, it goes way beyond just this one island nation. What do you think is the most important takeaway here?
I think is how this case shows that even a place like the Bahamas, right, this beautiful, idyllic nation, it's not immune to transnational crime.
Yeah.
And how these forces, power and profit, how they can corrupt even the most beautiful places.
It really does challenge our perceptions, right? You think about paradise, and then you realize that corruption can be lurking anywhere. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener really takes away from this whole conversation?
I hope they understand that this case, this isn't just some isolated thing. This is a global problem. We're all connected. And that means transnational crime, corruption, the drug trade, these things affect all of us, even if we don't see it directly in our everyday lives.
Right. It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
So it's a call to action, right? For all of us to be more informed, to be engaged citizens, to demand more from our leaders, and to support the efforts to fight these global threats. So what can individuals actually do to make a difference when we're talking about these deeply entrenched problems?
I think it starts with awareness, with education. The more we understand about these issues, the better choices we can make as consumers, as voters, as members of our communities. We can support organizations that are fighting corruption. We can push for policies that actually address the root causes of these problems.
Yeah, and it's like you said before, it's about supply and demand. So we need to be conscious of where we're putting our money, the products we're buying, the companies we're supporting.
Exactly. And don't forget, change, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes everyone working together, and it takes believing that a better world is possible.
Absolutely.
This case, it might seem far away for some people, but it reminds us how connected we all are, and it shows how important it is to work together to face these challenges.
Well, this deep dive has been truly eye-opening.
Right.
We uncovered this web of alleged corruption. We explored how difficult it is to fight transnational crime, and we really grappled with the consequences of the drug trade.
Yeah.
I feel like our listener is walking away with a lot to think about, a lot of new information about these really critical issues.
It's been a pleasure to be here to talk about this with you. And I hope this deep dive encourages everyone to keep learning, to keep asking questions, to keep digging deeper.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your insights with us. It's been a pleasure having you. And to our listeners, until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.